silence was a predator. It coiled in the cold air of the High Council chamber, thick with the scent of old stone, wood smoke, and the unsheathed animosity of 24 alphas. Moonlight, sharp and silver, fell through the high-arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the oppressive stillness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the dead quiet. Each thump a reminder of the curse etched into the skin of my shoulder. I stood alone in the center of the great stone circle, a lamb presented for slaughter, my thin ceremonial shift doing nothing to ward off the chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then, the oldest among them, Elder Lycoris, shifted in his carved oak throne, and the scrape of wood on stone was the only sound before the true trial began. "She is an abomination, Alpha King." Lycoris's voice was a gravelly rasp, a sound like stones grinding together. His eyes, milky with age, were fixed on Rayleigh, but his words were daggers aimed at me. "She wears the moon's betrayal on her very flesh. A walking blight. You defy generations of wisdom by bringing her here. Not as a prisoner, but as this." He gestured a gnarled hand in my direction, a flick of dismissal that sent a fresh wave of humiliation crashing over me. The assembled alphas, a jury of snarling wolves in human skin, murmured their assent, a low guttural rumble that vibrated through the floor. Rayleigh, seated on the highest throne carved from the heart of an ancient weirwood, did not move. He was a statue of contained power, all coiled muscle and brutal stillness. The firelight from the central hearth cast flickering shadows across his face, making his silver eyes seem to burn with an inner cold. He had forbidden me to look at him, a command given with a soft touch to my cheek before we entered. "Look at them, Quilira," he had murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "Let them see you are not afraid. Let them see my strength in you." But I was afraid. Terror was a living thing clawing at my throat. For 20 years I had been shunned, spat upon, and exiled. The mark on my shoulder blade, a spiraling crescent moon pierced by a shadowed dagger, was not just a prophecy, but a brand. It had kept me starved of touch, of kindness, of belonging. Now I was the mate of the Alpha King, and that brand was not a reason for my exile, but the centerpiece of a political firestorm. "The prophecy is clear," another elder, a severe-looking female named Ismelda, added, her voice sharp and brittle. "When the child of the broken moon is claimed by the King of the North, his blood will anoint the stone, and his line will end in shadow. We are not debating folklore, Rayleigh. We are speaking of the survival of all packs." Every eye was on me, stripping me bare. They weren't seeing a woman, they were seeing an instrument of doom. They saw the end of Rayleigh Vornak, the strongest Alpha King in 5 centuries, and they saw it in the trembling form of a cursed Omega. My wolf, a timid creature that had spent a lifetime in hiding, whimpered within me, desperate to flee, to seek the shelter of her Alpha's presence. But I held my ground, forcing my chin up, my gaze sweeping over the hostile faces as he had commanded. I would not give them the satisfaction of my tears. "Have you finished?" Rayleigh's voice finally cut through the chamber. It was not loud, but it held the chilling weight of absolute authority. The murmuring ceased instantly. Even the fire seemed to crackle more quietly. Lycoris bristled. "Do not mistake our concern for disrespect, my king. We speak for the good of the realm." "Your concern," Rayleigh said, the word dripping with contempt, "reeks of fear. You fear change. You fear a prophecy you barely understand. Most of all, you fear what you cannot control." He rose slowly, deliberately, his sheer size and presence dominating the vast chamber. He was a force of nature, a storm about to break. He descended the few steps from his throne and began to walk toward me, his heavy leather boots echoing with chilling finality. The alphas tensed. A few unconsciously bared their teeth. The air grew thick, charged with ozone and the primal scent of a territorial challenge. With every step he took, the bond between us thrummed, a living current that pulled at my soul. It was a terrifying, exhilarating song of possession, of belonging. He stopped directly in front of me, So close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the scent of him, pine cold mountain air, and something uniquely his, something like distant lightning, filled my senses, calming the frantic beat of my heart. He did not look at me. His gaze remained locked on the council. "You speak of her mark," he said, his voice a low growl that resonated deep in my chest. "You see a curse, a threat?" He reached out, his hand moving with unnerving slowness, and gently pushed the thin fabric of my shift off my right shoulder, bearing the mark to the firelight. A collective gasp swept the room. The mark, usually a faint silvery scar, seemed to shimmer in the flickering light, almost as if it were alive. I flinched, a lifetime of shame making me want to cover myself, to hide the thing that defined me. Raylith's fingers, warm and calloused, brushed against the edge of the mark. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through me. It wasn't painful. It was awaking. A hum of energy that seemed to emanate from the very lines of the prophecy on my skin. He let his thumb trace the curve of the crescent moon, and the silvery lines pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. Lycoris shot to his feet. "Sorcery, it responds to you. The prophecy begins." "Silence," Raylith commanded, and the word was not a request. It was a physical force that slammed the elder back into his seat. Raylith's silver eyes blazed. The wolf so close to the surface, it was a miracle his human form contained it. "I see what you see, Lycoris. I see the prophecy you all fear, but I also see what your cowardice blinds you to." He turned his head slightly, and for the first time, his eyes met mine. The sheer, untamed possessiveness in them stole my breath. There was no fear, no doubt, only a fierce, unwavering certainty that defied all logic. "I see my mate, my queen. The other half of my soul, gifted to me by the moon itself. You would have me cast her aside? You would have me defy the goddess we all serve because of the whispers of long-dead seers?" He slid his hand from my shoulder, down my arm, and laced his fingers through mine. His grip was iron, a silent promise of protection, of unity. He pulled me to his side, tucking me against his body as if I were the most precious treasure in his kingdom. The alpha stared, stunned into silence by the flagrant display of ownership. He was not just defending me. He was claiming me, binding me to him in front of the very wolves who would see me dead. "She is Quilira Vornak," he announced, his voice ringing with the force of royal decree. "Her place is here, at my side. The prophecy will be what we make of it. Her mark is not a sign of my doom. It is a symbol of our strength. Anyone," he let his gaze sweep across the council, a predator surveying his territory, "who speaks against her, speaks against me. Anyone who threatens her, threatens this kingdom. Consider this your only warning." He turned, pulling me with him, and walked toward the massive oak doors of the chamber, leaving the council in stunned, impotent silence. His stride was long and confident, and I had to hurry to keep up. My mind was a whirlwind of shock, gratitude, and a bone-deep terror that was somehow sharper than before. He hadn't just defied them, he had declared war on fate itself, and he had placed me at the very center of the battle. The moment the doors closed behind us, sealing off the venomous silence of the council, the strength that had held me upright dissolved. My knees buckled. Raylith caught me effortlessly, sweeping me into his arms, as if I weighed nothing. He held me tightly against his chest, his chin resting on the top of my head as he strode down the torchlit corridor. "You were magnificent," he murmured into my hair, his voice losing its hard, regal edge and softening into something private, something meant only for me. "You did not flinch. You showed them the queen you are." I buried my face in the rough fabric of his tunic, inhaling his scent, trying to stop the trembling that racked my body. "I was terrified," I whispered, the confession muffled against him. "They hate me, Raylith. They will never accept me." "They don't have to accept you," he rumbled, his steps never faltering. "They only have to obey me." He carried me to our chambers, the Alpha King's private suite, that still felt too grand, too opulent for a girl who had spent most of her life sleeping in barns and abandoned huts. He set me down gently on the edge of the massive bed, its furs thick and warm. He knelt before me, his large hands resting on my knees, his silver eyes searching my face. "The fear is a poison, Kalira," he said softly. "Don't let it take root. What you felt in there, that light from the mark, that is our hope, not our doom." "What was it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I've never felt that before. It's always been cold, a dead thing on my skin." "It has never been touched by its other half," he answered, his gaze intense. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing my jaw. "The prophecy is a lock. We, Kalira, are the key. They see only the end, but they are blind to the beginning." He leaned in, his forehead pressing against mine. For a long moment we just breathed together, a silent exchange of fear and comfort, of doubt and reassurance. His strength flowed into me, a tangible warmth that pushed back the chill of the council chamber. But even in his arms, the words of the prophecy echoed in my mind. "His blood will anoint the stone." "Lycoris," I whispered, the name tasting like ash. "He will not let this go. He saw the mark glow. He will use it to turn them against you." A low growl rumbled in Rayleith's chest. "Lycoris is a dying wolf howling at a moon he can no longer reach. His power is in whispers and shadows. Mine is in tooth and claw." He pulled back slightly, his thumb stroking my cheek. The vulnerability I saw in his eyes for a fleeting second was more shocking than his public display of power. It was a crack in the armor of the Alpha King, a glimpse of the man beneath who had tied his fate to a living curse. "They think the prophecy is about your death," I said, the words aching in my throat. "That my hand will be the one to—" I couldn't finish. "It is," he said, his voice utterly calm. And my heart stopped. I stared at him, my blood running cold. "What?" He held my gaze, his silver eyes unflinching and deadly serious. "It is about my death, Kalira, but that is not the same as my end." He lifted his hand and gently touched the mark on my shoulder again, his fingers warm against my skin. The seers who wrote the words were short-sighted. They saw an Alpha King fall, and they assumed it was a tragedy. His eyes held a strange, mesmerizing light, a fire of ancient knowledge. They never thought to ask what rises in his place. The words hung in the air between us, more chilling than any curse the council could spit. "It is about my death, but that is not the same as my end." The fire in the hearth crackled, a stark, loud sound in the sudden, suffocating silence of our chambers. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the shape of his meaning, but it was like trying to hold smoke. Death was an end. It was the final, unbreachable wall. For an Alpha King, it was the end of his line, his reign, his pack's security. "I don't understand," I whispered, the sound fragile. My hands, still held in his, were cold as ice. "How can death not be the end?" Rayleith's silver eyes held mine, and in their depths, I saw not madness, but an ancient, weary certainty. "Because our kind, Kalira, is older than the stones of this castle. We are more than flesh and bone. We are spirit. We are legacy. And the Vornik line. We hold secrets the other packs have long forgotten." He released one of my hands and rose, his movement fluid and powerful. He began to pace before the fire, a caged wolf contemplating the bars of his own destiny. "For centuries," he began, his voice a low, mesmerizing rumble. "My ancestors have known this prophecy would come. They did not fear it. They prepared for it. They studied the old ways, the deep magic that flows beneath the world, the language the moon speaks to those with the will to listen." He stopped and turned to face me, his shadow long and imposing in the firelight. "The prophecy is not a curse. It is a crucible. It is meant to burn away the old and forge something new, something stronger." "Burn away what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You?" "The Alpha King as he is," he corrected, his gaze intense. "A mortal wolf, bound by a single lifetime. They see my blood on the stone as a final act. I see it as an offering, an anchor. I shook my head, a knot of fear and confusion tightening in my stomach. It was too much. Riddles wrapped in mysteries, spoken as if they were simple truths. My whole life, the mark on my shoulder had been a clear, brutal sentence. You will be a killer. An alpha's doom. Raelith was trying to rewrite the very nature of my existence, and my terrified soul didn't know if it could bear the hope. Hope, I had learned long ago, was a far more dangerous poison than despair. Show me, I said, the words surprising me with their sudden strength. I stood up from the bed, my bare feet cold on the stone floor. If this is true, if your ancestors prepared for it, there must be proof, something more than words. A slow smile touched his lips, a rare, breathtaking sight. It did not erase the severity of his expression, but it softened the edges, revealing the man who had chosen a cursed Omega in defiance of the world. I was hoping you would ask. He crossed the room to a heavy tapestry depicting a great white wolf battling a serpent made of shadow. I had always assumed it was mere decoration, but Raelith reached for a specific thread in the border, a single strand of silver woven among the dark wool, and pulled. There was a low groan of stone grinding against stone, and a section of the wall beside the tapestry swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage. A draft of cool, musty air, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things, billowed out. Where does it lead? I breathed, peering into the oppressive darkness. To the heart of this castle, he said, taking a lit torch from a sconce on the wall. To the Vornek legacy. He held out his free hand to me. Trust me, Quilira. It was the same choice I had made at the choosing, to place my hand, my fate, in his. I did it without hesitation, my fingers curling around his strong, warm ones. He led me into the passage, and the stone door swung shut behind us with a heavy, final thud, plunging us into a world lit only by the flickering flame of our torch. The stairway spiraled down, deep into the foundations of the mountain upon which the castle was built. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. Here there was no echo of the council's hatred, no whispers from suspicious pack members. There was only the sound of our footsteps, the crackle of the torch, and the reassuring grip of his hand in mine. After what felt like an eternity, we emerged into a circular chamber, its walls lined not with stone, but with shelves carved directly into the rock, each one overflowing with ancient scrolls and leather-bound tomes. It was a library, but unlike any I had ever imagined. It was a secret, a hoard of knowledge hidden from the world. The air smelled of aged parchment, dry ink, and something else. A faint electric hum of latent power. My father brought me here when I came of age, Raelith said, his voice reverent in the enclosed space. He told me that to rule, a king must have strength of arm, but to endure, he must have strength of knowledge. He showed me what his father showed him, the truth of our line. He led me to a pedestal in the center of the room. On it rested a single massive book, its cover made of what looked like petrified wood, bound in iron and sealed with the Vornak crest, a wolf's head against a mountain peak. He laid his hand upon the crest, and I felt a faint tremor run through the floor. With a low click, the lock released. He opened the book. The pages were not paper, but vellum, thin and impossibly preserved. The script was archaic, written in a spidery, elegant hand, with illustrations in faded ink of constellations, ritual circles, and wolves whose eyes seemed to hold an unnatural intelligence. The Vornek Grimoire, he said softly, the collected knowledge of every alpha king in my line. And here, he turned several pages, his fingers tracing the script with a familiarity that spoke of countless hours spent in this very room. He stopped at a page dominated by a drawing that made my blood run cold. It was my mark. The spiraling crescent moon pierced by a shadowed dagger, but it was different. Around the mark were intricate circles of text, lines of prophecy and notation that I had never seen. Raelith pointed to a section of text beneath the drawing. They all knew of the mark, he explained. They called it the unio sanguinis, the blood union. The seers of old saw only the surface, a death, an end, but my ancestor, the first king, saw deeper. Read this. I leaned closer, the torchlight flickering over the ancient words. The language was old, but I could parse its meaning. Let the lesser alphas fear the blade. Let them see only the setting sun. The king of the north knows the truth. The blade is not an ending, but a key. His blood anoints the stone not in sacrifice, but in consecration. He does not fall, but is reborn. His mortality is shed, and the spirit of the first wolf, the progenitor of our line, rises to walk in his flesh. I looked up at him, my heart hammering. Reborn, the first wolf? An ancient, powerful spirit, Rayleigh confirmed, his eyes burning with an almost zealous fire. The original alpha of this mountain, a being of immense power tethered to this land, to this bloodline. The prophecy is not my death knell, Quilira. It is my ascension, an ascension that can only be triggered by the one who bears the mark. By you. Suddenly, my curse felt like something else entirely. Not a weapon of destruction, but a catalyst, a holy instrument. I was not the killer of the Alpha King. I was the maker of… what? A god? Why me? I whispered, touching my shoulder. Why was I born with this? Because your bloodline is as old as mine, he said, turning a page. On it were two crudely drawn family trees, their roots twisting together at the very bottom of the vellum. Your ancestors were the first omegas of this mountain, the keepers of the moon's balance. Your line was thought to be lost for 500 years, until you were born. He looked at me, and the raw adoration in his eyes was so potent it made my knees weak. Do you see now? You are not a curse. You are the fulfillment of a promise made when the world was young. You are the only one with the power to unlock my true potential, and I am the only one with the strength to withstand it. He reached out and cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. They want to cast you out, my beautiful, fierce Omega. But without you, I am just another king destined to grow old and die. With you, I am eternal. The truth of it settled over me, vast and terrifying and beautiful. We were not victims of fate. We were its chosen agents. The fear that had been my constant companion for 20 years began to recede, replaced by a fragile, burgeoning sense of purpose. My hand, the one that was supposed to bring about his end, was meant to create something far greater. As this realization dawned, a strange warmth spread across my shoulder blade. I looked down, and through the thin fabric of my shift, I could see a soft, silvery light pulsing from my mark. It was responding to the grimoire, to the truth, to him. The connection between us, the mate bond, flared with an intensity that left me breathless. It was no longer just a bond between man and woman, Alpha and Omega. It felt cosmic, ancient, and unbreakable. The mark, I breathed. It's warm. Rayleigh smiled, a genuine, triumphant expression. It recognizes its purpose. He leaned in, his intent clear. He was going to kiss me, to seal this revelation, this acceptance, with the claiming touch I had craved since the night of the choosing. His lips were inches from mine, his scent overwhelming my senses, the primal wolf in me rising to meet its mate, its alpha, its king. Suddenly, a deep, resonant boom echoed from far above, vibrating through the stone floor beneath our feet. It sounded again, heavier this time, a warning. Rayleigh pulled back instantly, his head snapping up, his expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. The Alpha King was back, the tender mate banished. The warning bells, he growled. They are only rung for an attack on the castle or a formal challenge to the throne. Before I could process his words, we heard frantic footsteps echoing down the hidden stairwell. A moment later, his beta, Kalen, burst into the chamber, his face pale and his breathing ragged. He skidded to a halt, his eyes wide as he took in the secret library, but his urgency overrode his shock. My king, he gasped, bowing his head hastily. Forgive the intrusion, but you must come. It is Elder Lycoris. He has invoked the right of stone. Raelith's entire body went rigid. A low, menacing growl ripped from his chest, a sound so feral it made the torches flicker. He wouldn't dare. He has, Kaelin insisted, his voice laced with dread. He stands before the High Council and the assembled pack at the base of the monolith. He has used the prophecy as his justification. He claims you are unfit, blinded by a cursed Omega, and that he must sever the bond to save the kingdom. Kaelin's eyes flickered to me, a hint of fear in them. He is challenging your claim to your mate. A predator's stillness fell over Raelith. The warmth of the mate, the scholar of the grimoire, vanished completely, consumed by the icy fury of the Alpha King. His muscles bunched under his skin, and the air around him seemed to crackle with contained violence. He didn't look at me, didn't look at Kaelin. His silver eyes were fixed on the darkness of the passage. But I knew he was seeing the monolith, the council, and Lycoris's treacherous face. The right of stone, he bit out, the words like chips of granite. An ancient law, used only to challenge a mating that threatens the survival of the bloodline. He twists its purpose. He uses our laws as a weapon against his king. What is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The secret library, which moments ago had felt like a sanctuary of truth, now felt like a tomb. We were trapped beneath the castle while above, my very existence was being used to tear Raelith's world apart. A trial of will, Kaelin supplied, his gaze full of grim respect for the tradition and fear for its consequences. The Challenger and the Alpha both place their hands upon the monolith. They pour their spirit, their very essence as a wolf, into the stone. The stone, ancient and tied to the spirit of the pack, renders a judgment. It recognizes the stronger Alpha, the more legitimate claim. The loser is diminished. Their spirit is bruised, their authority shattered. Sometimes they are stripped of their wolf entirely. My stomach plummeted. To lose one's wolf was a fate worse than death. It was to be hollowed out, left a walking shell. And Lycoris was forcing this upon Raelith. He is not challenging my authority as king, Raelith clarified. His voice a low, dangerous growl. He is too much of a coward for that. He challenges my claim to you. If he wins, the magic of the monolith will sever our bond. It will declare you anathema to the pack, and I would be forbidden by ancient law from ever touching you again. The thought was a physical blow. To have his presence, his scent, the thrum of our connection ripped away from me. It would not just be a loss. It would be an amputation of the soul. After a lifetime of being nothing, I had just discovered I was everything, and now this old, bitter wolf sought to turn me back into nothing once more. He cannot win, I said, trying to force a strength I did not feel into my voice. I looked at Raelith, at this titan of a man, a king in every sense of the word. You are the Alpha King. He is a frail old man. Do not mistake age for weakness, Quilira, Raelith warned, finally turning his glacial gaze to me. His spirit is old, cunning, and right now it is fueled by the righteous fire of a zealot. He believes he is saving us all. That conviction gives him a strength that cannot be underestimated. He strode past me and snatched the torch from its sconce. Kaelin, get her back to our chambers. Bar the door. No one enters. No, I said, stepping in front of him, blocking his path. It was perhaps the bravest thing I had ever done. His sheer size was intimidating, the fury rolling off him a palpable force. But the thought of hiding while he fought for us, for the very bond that made me whole, was unbearable. The challenge is about me. I will not hide like a frightened child. I will stand with you. For a long moment he stared down at me, his jaw tight. I saw the conflict in his eyes. The instinct to protect me versus the respect for the queen he wanted me to be. The queen he had told the council I already was. Finally, he gave a sharp, decisive nod. You will stand behind me. You will not speak. You will not move. And you will not, under any circumstances, allow your fear to feed the doubt he is trying to sow. Show them your strength, Quilira. Show them our strength. He didn't offer me his hand this time. He simply turned and led the way, his stride powerful and urgent. Kaelin fell into step behind me, a silent, loyal guard. We ascended the winding stairs and moved through the cold, echoing corridors of the castle. Servants and guards flattened themselves against the walls as we passed, their eyes wide with fear and awe. They could feel the power radiating from their king, a storm about to break. Every step brought us closer to the great doors that led to the central courtyard, and with every step, the bond between us pulsed with Rayleith's cold, focused rage. It wasn't a hot, uncontrolled anger, but something far more terrifying. The absolute, methodical certainty of a predator closing in on its prey. The massive oak doors were thrown open, and the scene was exactly as Kaelin had described. The entire pack was assembled in a silent, tense circle in the vast courtyard. In the center, bathed in the stark light of a full, unforgiving moon, stood the monolith. It was a single, towering spear of black obsidian that seemed to drink the light from the air, pulsating with a faint internal energy. It was the heart of the pack, the anchor of their lands. Elder Lycoris stood before it, his back ramrod straight. He looked ancient and formidable in his ceremonial robes, his white hair like a crown of frost in the moonlight. The rest of the council stood behind him, a phalanx of silent condemnation. They were his witnesses, his jury. The air was thick with the scent of wolf, of fear, and of the electric tang of old magic waking from its slumber. When Rayleith stepped into the courtyard, a collective gasp went through the crowd. He was no longer just their king. He was their champion, their alpha, walking to face a challenge as old as their race. I followed in his wake, Kaelin a steadfast shadow at my side. Every eye fell on me. I could feel their hatred, their fear, their blame. I was the witch, the curse, the source of the schism that threatened to tear them apart. I lifted my chin, just as he had taught me, and met their gazes. I would not let them see me break. Rayleith came to a stop 10 feet from the monolith, his presence dominating the space. "You have overstepped, old wolf," he said, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity in the silence. "You have invoked a sacred right for a petty, fear-driven grievance. There will be a reckoning for this." Lycoris did not flinch. "The only reckoning I seek is the one that will save this pack from your folly, my king. I do this not out of hatred for you, but out of love for our people. The prophecy is absolute. By binding yourself to this Omega, you have doomed us all. I will sever the chain before it can drag you, and all of us, into the abyss. The only thing you will do is shatter yourself against a bond sanctioned by the moon itself," Rayleith countered, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. "Let us begin. I grow weary of your theatrics." Lycoris inclined his head. He stepped forward and placed his right hand flat against the cold, smooth surface of the monolith. He closed his eyes, his lips moving in a silent incantation. A moment later, Rayleith stepped forward and did the same, placing his hand a foot away from Lycoris's. For a second, nothing happened. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the stone, a deep, resonant vibration that I felt in my bones. A network of faint silver lines began to glow on the obsidian surface, spreading out from their hands like cracks in ice. The rite had begun. I watched, my heart lodged in my throat. I could feel it through the bond, a massive, steady outflow of power from Rayleith. It was like a river, deep and strong and seemingly endless, pouring into the stone. Lycoris, by contrast, was a raging fire. His power flared, hot and intense, fueled by decades of resentment and a fanatic's conviction. Sweat beaded on his brow, and the muscles in his arms stood out like cords. Rayleith, however, remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable, his breathing even. He was an immovable mountain against which Lycoris's storm was breaking. The silver light from the stone intensified, casting the courtyard in an eerie glow. The humming grew louder, a sound that seemed to vibrate at the very edge of hearing. The pack wolves watched, mesmerized, their eyes reflecting the pulsing light. They could feel the raw power of the two alphas, a spiritual battle being waged in a form none of them had ever witnessed before. I focused on my bond with Raylith, trying to send him my strength, my belief, anything that could help. I felt his presence in my mind, a bulwark of absolute certainty. I will not be broken, his spirit seemed to say to mine. He cannot take you from me. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Lycoris was beginning to falter. A tremor started in his hand and ran up his arm. His face was pale, his breathing ragged. He was pouring every last drop of his essence into the stone, and it was not enough. Raylith's power was simply too vast, too deep. The silver light around Raylith's hand was brilliant, almost blinding, while the light around Lycoris's was flickering, fading. He was losing. The pack could see it. A low murmur of relief began to ripple through the crowd. Then Lycoris's eyes snapped open. They were filled with a wild, desperate light. He knew he was defeated, but he was not finished. "If I cannot break the bond," he roared, his voice cracking with strain, "then I will show them what it is. I will show them the doom you have embraced." He drew a shuddering breath and began to chant, his voice rising in a fanatic's crescendo. "When the child of the broken moon is claimed by the king of the north, his blood will anoint the stone, and his line will end in shadow." He wasn't just speaking the words. He was channeling them, pouring all his remaining energy, all the pack's collective fear of the prophecy, into the monolith. The silver light of the stone was instantly corrupted. A vein of angry, malevolent red shot out from Lycoris's hand, snaking across the obsidian toward Raylith's. It was the power of the prophecy, weaponized. Raylith's jaw clenched. He was forced to divert some of his energy to push back against this new attack. But the target of the prophecy was not him. It was me. A searing, unimaginable pain exploded on my shoulder blade. I screamed, stumbling back, my hand flying to the spot. It felt as if a hot brand was being pressed into my flesh. The mark, my mark, was on fire. Through the thin fabric of my shift, a terrifying blood-red light pulsed in time with my frantic heartbeat, a beacon of agony. The warm, gentle glow I had felt in the library was gone, replaced by this violating, malevolent energy. Lycoris was using the monolith to pour the curse directly into me. My scream shattered Raylith's concentration. His head whipped around, his silver eyes finding me in the crowd, widening in fury and horror as he saw my agony, saw the red light pulsing on my shoulder. It was only a fraction of a second, a momentary break in his focus, but it was all the opening Lycoris needed. The red energy surged, overwhelming Raylith's defenses. It struck his hand and he roared, a sound of pure, untamed rage and pain as the corrupting magic of the prophecy slammed into him. He recoiled, his hand ripped from the stone as if burned. The red light vanished. Lycoris collapsed to the ground, his energy spent, a triumphant, hateful smile on his lips. The monolith fell silent. The light died. The rite was over. And Raylith had removed his hand. He had broken the connection. Lycoris, in his defeat, had won. The world went silent. Not a quiet silence, but a dead one. The kind that follows a lightning strike, heavy with ozone and dread. The monolith stood inert, a cold spear of black rock once more, its judgment rendered. The pack was a frozen sea of faces, their expressions a mixture of shock, fear, and a dawning terrible pity, aimed at their king. They had all seen it. Raylith had broken the connection. He had lost. And I was supposed to be severed from him. My first frantic instinct was to feel for the bond. I reached for it with my soul, expecting to find a hollow, aching void where his presence used to be. But it was there. It was horribly, painfully there. It felt frayed, scorched, as if it had been put to the torch and had somehow refused to burn. A sharp, phantom ache echoed from my shoulder, but the agonizing fire was gone. Lycoris, helped to his feet by two of the other elders, was a spent force, but his eyes glittered with venomous triumph. "It is done," he rasped, his voice carrying across the stunned courtyard. "The sacred stone has spoken. The bond is broken. The curse is contained." He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me. "She is anathema. Banish her, my king. Uphold the law you are sworn to protect. The council members behind him straightened, their faces hard and resolute. Ismelda, her features a mask of cold duty, stepped forward. The elder is correct, Alpha King. The right is absolute. Your personal feelings are now irrelevant. The pack's survival is paramount. You must cast her out, now. Rayleigh had not moved. He stood with his back to them, his head bowed, his hands still tingling from the monolith's corrupted energy. For a terrifying moment, he looked defeated. The pack saw it, and a wave of despair washed through them, a scent of misery and fear that choked the air. Then he lifted his head. Slowly he turned, not to face the council, but to look at me. His silver eyes cut through the crowd, finding mine. The fury in them was a white-hot furnace. But beneath it was a question, a desperate, silent plea. Are you still there? I gave him the smallest of nods, a confirmation that would be invisible to anyone else. A flicker of something, relief, resolve, sheer feral power, passed across his face. The defeated king vanished, and the predator returned. He started walking toward me. A shocked murmur rippled through the pack. He was moving with purpose, his long strides eating up the distance, ignoring the council, ignoring the judgment, ignoring everything but the path to his mate. Rayleigh, what are you doing? Ismelda demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. Stop! You defy the will of the stone! He didn't even glance at her. He came to a stop in front of me, his shadow falling over me like a shield. The pack held its collective breath. He was going to defy them. He was going to defy the ancient magic itself. He reached out, his hand moving with deliberate slowness, and gently, reverently, pushed the tattered fabric of my shift from my shoulder. A collective gasp, louder and more shocked than any before, swept the courtyard. The mark was glowing. It was not the malevolent red of Lycoris's attack, nor the faint silver of its awakening in the library. My mark, the symbol of my curse, was now shining with a steady, luminous gold. The light was warm, powerful, pulsing in time with my own heartbeat. It was the color of a king's crown, of the sun at its zenith, of the Vornek sigil. The lines of the crescent moon and the dagger were no longer scars of a curse, but lines of living light, etched in fire and fate. Rayleigh's fingers, trembling slightly, brushed against the glowing mark. The moment he touched me, the bond between us ignited. It surged, a tidal wave of power and possession, so strong it made my knees buckle. It was no longer frayed or scorched. It was forged anew, tempered in the corrupting fire of the right, and made infinitely stronger. He felt it too. A low growl of pure, triumphant possession rumbled in his chest. The bond is not broken, he declared, his voice a thunderclap that shattered the silence. He never took his eyes off me, speaking to me, for me, but letting the whole world hear. It is consecrated. He slid his hand from my shoulder to the nape of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, and tilted my head back. He was claiming me, all over again, in front of everyone. The stone did not reject our union, it rejected his, he said, finally flicking a contemptuous glance at Lycoris. It rejected his fear, his poison, his weakness. Lies, Lycoris shrieked, finding his voice. Trickery, he broke the connection, we all saw it. He is a lawbreaker, defying a sacred judgment to protect his cursed whore. The word struck me like a physical blow, but Rayleigh's grip on me was an anchor. His wolf, which had been a controlled inferno, now threatened to rage. His eyes blazed, and for a second, I thought he would shift and tear the old wolf's throat out right there. But he restrained himself, channeling his fury into a chilling, regal authority. He turned to face the council, pulling me to his side, his arm a band of iron around my waist. I broke the connection to save my mate from your elder's dishonorable attack, an attack that proves his unfitness to lead or advise anyone. He perverted a sacred right, and in doing so, Rayleigh's lips curled into a dangerous smile. He has given us a gift. He has shown us the truth. He looked down at my still glowing mark, his expression one of awe. This is not the mark of a curse. This is the mark of a queen. His attempt to weaponize the prophecy has only served to awaken its true power. He raised his voice, addressing the entire bewildered pack. You have put your faith in whispers and fear for too long. Tonight, you will put your faith in your alpha. Quilira is my mate. She is your queen. The judgment of the monolith is flawed. The judgment of your king is final. Without another word, he turned and began walking us back toward the castle doors, leaving chaos in our wake. The pack was in turmoil, torn between the sacred law they had just witnessed and the absolute authority of their alpha. The council was sputtering with impotent rage. Lycoris was screaming about blasphemy. Their voices faded as the heavy doors boomed shut behind us, plunging us into the relative quiet of the torchlit hall. The moment we were alone, the facade of unbreakable strength cracked. Raelith leaned against the closed door, his head thrown back against the wood, and let out a long, ragged breath. The hand that had held me so firmly was trembling. He had won the confrontation, but the cost was monumental. He had publicly placed himself above the pack's most sacred laws. I stepped forward and placed my hand on his chest, over his heart. It was hammering, a frantic, wild rhythm. Through the bond I could feel the riot of his emotions, the searing rage at Lycoris, the profound relief that our bond had survived, and a deep gnawing uncertainty about what would come next. It held, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Our bond, it held. He covered my hand with his, pressing it harder against his chest. He opened his eyes, and they were raw with vulnerability. He hurt you. For that alone, I should have killed him. You saved me, I corrected gently. And in doing so, you showed me what it is to be a king. I moved my other hand to his face, my thumb tracing the hard line of his jaw. My wolf, so long a timid creature, was surging within me, filled with a fierce, protective instinct. She wanted to soothe her mate, to lick his wounds, to face down the world with him. We are not broken, Raelith. Look. I pulled back the shift from my shoulder. The golden light was softer now, a warm, gentle pulse against my skin. It felt right. It felt like a part of me that had been asleep had finally woken up. He stared at it, his expression a mixture of reverence and analytical focus. Lycoris didn't understand, he murmured, his mind already working, piecing it together. He thought he was pouring the curse into you, but the prophecy isn't a curse. It's a blueprint. He was trying to burn the bridge, but all he did was provide the fire to forge it in steel. He met my eyes, a dawning realization in his. The grimoire spoke of consecration. Lycoris, in his infinite arrogance, performed the first step of the ritual for us. He pushed off the door and led me, his hand in mine, back toward our chambers. He moved with a new energy, the uncertainty replaced by a feverish purpose. Once inside, he didn't go to the fire or the bed. He went straight back to the hidden passage. Come, he said, his voice urgent. We need to understand what has happened. Down in the secret library, he laid the Vornak grimoire open on the pedestal. He bypassed the page with the drawing of the mark and flipped to a section filled with complex diagrams of ritual circles and astronomical charts. Here, he said, his finger tracing a line of text. The unio sanguinis must first be awakened by a trial of spirit. The vessel must be tested by the pack's collective doubt. The bond must withstand the fire of false judgment. Only then will the vessel be prepared to receive the king's blood, not as a wound, but as an anointing. He looked from the book to my shoulder and back again. The rite of stone. It was the trial of spirit. He forced it upon us, and we passed. Awe and terror warred within me. We were walking a path laid down centuries ago, and our greatest enemy had just unwittingly shoved us further along it. So what now? I asked. My voice hushed in the sacred quiet of the library. The council believes you are a heretic. The pack is divided. Lycoris will not stop. He will use this. Let him, Raelith said. A cold, sharp edge to his voice. He closed the massive grimoire with a definitive thud. He wanted a reckoning. He wanted to see the prophecy fulfilled. He accused me of trying to defy it. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. A wolf smile, full of teeth. He turned to me, his silver eyes blazing with a terrifying, brilliant light. He was wrong. I have no intention of defying the prophecy. I am going to complete it. He took my hand, his grip like iron, his decision absolute. Lycoris wanted to see my blood anoint the stone to prove you are a curse, so we will give it to him. We will go to the altar of the first wolf, and we will finish what he started, tonight. The air in the secret library felt thin, the torchlight casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to hold their breath. Raylith's words echoed in the enclosed space, a declaration of war against fate itself. We will finish what he started, tonight. It was not a suggestion. It was an oath. The part of me that had spent a lifetime running from the prophecy screamed in protest, a primal instinct to flee from the sacrificial altar. But the woman who had stood beside her alpha, the queen whose mark now glowed with the fire of their bond, did not flinch. The altar of the first wolf, I repeated, the name tasting of ancient power and blood. Is it the monolith? No, Raylith said, his voice a low rumble of reverence and resolve. The monolith is just an anchor, a focal point for the pack's collective spirit. The true altar lies deeper, older. It is the heart of this mountain, the place where the first Vornic Alpha made his pact with the spirit of this land. He turned from the grimoire and looked at me, his silver eyes searching my face, assessing my strength. It will not be easy, Quilira. The ritual requires more than just blood. It requires a union, complete, absolute. Our spirits must be so intertwined that they cannot be told apart. What the first wolf will enter, it must not be me alone, but us. My breath caught. A union. He was speaking of the final step in a mating, the claiming, an act of such profound intimacy and spiritual significance that it was rarely performed outside the sacred week of the full moon, and always with days of preparation. To do it now, in the immediate, violent aftermath of the rite of stone, fueled by defiance and the raw, awakened magic of my mark. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and it felt terrifyingly, undeniably right. My wolf, which had been a steady presence since the mark had changed, rose within me, her spirit meeting his without reservation. She understood the primal truth of it better than my human mind. He was not just taking a mate. He was forging a weapon, a key, and a queen, all in a single, irrevocable act. I met his intense gaze and gave him the only answer I could. Then let us begin. A fire kindled in his eyes, a mixture of relief, adoration, and a fierce, untamable pride. He took my hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through my veins that radiated directly from the glowing mark on my shoulder. He led me from the library, not back up the stairs toward the castle, but deeper into the mountain, through a passage hidden behind the shelves of scrolls, a path even his beta, Kaelin, had not known existed. This tunnel was different. It was not carved by hand, but was a natural lava tube, its walls smooth and volcanic, pulsing with a faint geothermal warmth. The air grew thick with the scent of deep earth, of minerals, and of something else. A clean, sharp scent like ozone before a storm. The sense of latent power I had felt in the library was 1,000 times stronger here. It hummed in the rock, in the air, a living presence that seemed to watch our approach. The passage opened into a vast circular cavern. The ceiling was so high it was lost in shadow, but the cavern was not dark. Veins of a faintly glowing blue mineral, like captured starlight, crisscrossed the walls and floor, bathing the space in a soft, ethereal light. In the exact center of the cavern stood the altar. It was not a monolith, but a huge flat-topped slab of the same black obsidian, polished to a mirror-like sheen. Unlike the monolith in the courtyard, this stone was not empty. It was covered in a spiraling tapestry of carvings, ancient runes, constellations I didn't recognize, and at the very center, a depiction of a colossal wolf, its fur like storm clouds, its eyes like twin moons. The altar of the first wolf, Raylith breathed. his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on worship. He released my hand and walked toward it, his boots silent on the smooth stone floor. Every alpha king of my line has come here to swear his oath, to pledge his life and his blood to the pack and to the spirit that guards them. He stopped before the altar and turned to face me. But none have ever come to complete the prophecy. None have come to perform the unio sanguinis. The grimoire says the ritual requires two things, the anointing and the union. His eyes darkened, his gaze becoming possessive, primal. The blood and the bond. He unfastened the clasps of his heavy leather tunic and pulled it over his head, revealing the hard, muscled planes of his chest and shoulders. Scars, old and new, mapped his skin, a testament to a life of battle and command. He was the epitome of alpha strength, a perfect, powerful predator. Then he drew a wicked-looking ritual dagger from a sheath at his belt. Its blade was obsidian, its hilt carved from the bone of some great beast. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment the prophecy had foretold for 20 years. His blood will anoint the stone. My hand was not holding the dagger, but I was the reason for its use. I was the catalyst. My mark pulsed with a steady, warm light, a beacon in the blue-hued cavern. Rayleigh didn't hesitate. With a single fluid motion, he drew the blade across the palm of his left hand. The cut was deep, precise. Dark blood, almost black in the strange light, welled instantly. He extended his hand, palm up, over the center of the altar, directly over the carving of the great wolf. He did not flinch, his expression one of absolute, focused intensity. I, Rayleigh Vornak, Alpha King of the North, he began, his voice ringing with formal power, offer my blood not in death, but in pact. I offer my mortality in exchange for eternity. I call upon the spirit of the first wolf, the guardian of this mountain, the progenitor of my line. I summon you to witness this union, to accept this vessel, to rise and reclaim your strength. He closed his hand into a fist, and blood dripped onto the stone. The moment the first drop struck the obsidian, the entire cavern changed. The blue veins in the rock flared, their light intensifying dramatically. A deep, sonorous hum vibrated up from the floor, a sound so low it was felt more than heard. The runes carved on the altar began to glow, first with the same blue light, then shifting to a brilliant royal gold, the same gold that now shone from my mark. Rayleigh opened his hand and pressed it flat against the stone, smearing his blood over the carving of the wolf. The hum grew into a resonant groan, the sound of a mountain waking from a slumber of ages. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with an immense ancient power that made the hair on my arms stand on end. It was a terrifying, exhilarating presence. The first wolf was listening. His part done, Rayleigh turned to me. His eyes were no longer silver, but pools of liquid gold, reflecting the light of the altar. The wolf was so close to the surface now. It was a miracle he still held his human shape. He held out his bloodied hand to me. Quilira, he rasped, his voice rough with the strain of containing the power he had summoned. It is time. We must be one. Now. I walked toward him, my body moving with a will of its own, drawn by the gravity of his power, by the inexorable pull of our bond. My earlier fear was gone, burned away by the sacred fire of the ritual. There was only him, only us, only this moment that all of history had been leading to. I reached him and he pulled me against his body. His bare skin was hot against the thin fabric of my shift. His bloodied hand came up to cut my face, leaving a smear of crimson on my cheek. A warrior's mark. His other arm wrapped around my waist, lifting me effortlessly, and he sat me on the edge of the altar. The stone was not cold, but warm, humming with the lifeblood of my alpha, and the ancient spirit he had called. There can be no doubts, he murmured, his forehead pressing against mine. No fear, only trust. Give me all of it, Quilira. All of yourself. I do, I breathed, my hands coming up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. I am yours, Raelith. I have always been yours. His lips crashed down on mine. It was not a gentle kiss. It was acclaiming. It was lightning and thunder, fire and stone. It was everything he was. Powerful, possessive, untamed, and yet filled with a desperate, soul-deep love that shattered all my remaining defenses. The taste of his blood was on his lips, metallic and potent, and as I kissed him back, I was taking it into myself, accepting his sacrifice, his life, his very essence. The bond between us exploded. It was no longer a current, but a raging, uncontrollable nova of sensation and emotion. I felt his strength, his history, the weight of his crown, the souls of every Vornak king who had come before him. And he, in turn, felt my life of loneliness, my years of pain, my terror, and the fierce, defiant love I held for him. There were no secrets between us, no walls. We were laid bare, soul to soul. He laid me back on the altar, his body covering mine, a shield against the world. He tore the thin shift from my body, bearing me to the glowing light of the cavern. My mark shone like a miniature sun on my shoulder, its golden light bathing his face as he looked down at me. For a moment, his gaze softened, and all I saw was the man, Raelith, my mate, looking at his omega with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. Then the Alpha returned, his eyes blazing gold, and with a single powerful surge, he joined our bodies. I cried out as a pleasure so sharp and overwhelming it bordered on pain shot through me. It was not just a physical joining, it was a collision of souls. The moment he entered me, the golden light from my mark and the runes on the altar flared, merging into a single blinding column of light that shot up into the cavern's shadowed ceiling. The humming intensified into a roar that shook the very foundations of the mountain. He began to move, and it was the rhythm of the earth, of the tides, of life itself. Every thrust was a declaration, mine. Every sigh I gave in return was an answer, yours. The power that had been summoned from the earth, from the altar, began to flow through him and into me. I felt it coiling at the base of my spine, an ancient feral energy that was not mine and yet was becoming part of me. My wolf spirit, so long dormant, rose to meet it, embracing the raw, untamed magic. His growls were primal. The words he spoke against my skin were not a language I knew, but one my soul understood. He was marking me, not with his teeth, but with his spirit, branding me his queen, his mate, his equal in this impossible destiny. My body arched to meet his, my senses overwhelmed by the scent of him, the feel of his skin, the taste of his blood, the sight of his golden eyes burning into mine. He threw his head back, a guttural roar tearing from his throat as his climax crashed through him. A wave of raw power and life that flooded my womb, sealing our union, sealing our fate. In that same instant, the power within me crested. The golden light exploded from my mark, engulfing us both, blinding me. My mind was ripped from my body. For a timeless moment, I was everywhere. I was the mountain. I was the stone. I saw the pack above, felt their fear and confusion. I saw Lycoris, his spirit broken, his hatred a dying ember. And then I saw him, the first wolf. He was a being of shadow and starlight, of immense size and terrifying antiquity. I did not see him with my eyes, but with my soul. He turned his great cosmic head toward us, and his eyes, twin moons of silver and gold, looked not at Raelith, but straight through him, into me. There was no judgment, no malice, only a vast, ancient, and profound acknowledgement. The vessel is complete, a voice that was not a voice echoed in the void. The queen has unlocked the gate. Then, with the feeling of a star being born, his spirit surged forward. It did not destroy Raelith's. It flowed into him, around him, merging with his essence, a river of eternity pouring into the vessel that had been prepared for millennia. The blinding light faded. The roar of the mountain subsided to a low hum. I was back in my body, cradled in Rayleith's arms on the obsidian altar. The cavern was quiet, the blue veins in the rock and the golden runes on the stone pulsing with a gentle, steady rhythm. Rayleith slowly lifted his head. He looked the same, and yet entirely different. His silver eyes had returned, but now they held flecks of pure gold that seemed to shift and swirl like nebulae. The sheer weight of his presence had magnified tenfold. He was still my mate, my alpha, the man I loved, but he was also something more, something ancient, something eternal. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable, and then he spoke. His voice was a duet, his own familiar timbre underscored by a deep, resonant echo that seemed to vibrate from the stone itself. "It is done," he said. And then a small, odd smile touched his lips. He looked past me, up at the darkened ceiling of the cavern, as if seeing something no one else could. The moon is waiting for her new king. We ascended from the heart of the mountain not as an alpha and his omega, but as two halves of a single terrifying power. The air of the castle, once familiar, now felt thin and fragile, like a veil between worlds. The pack's scent, a complex tapestry of individual wolves, was an open book to Rayleith's heightened senses. I could feel his perception through our bond. He smelled their confusion, their fear, the simmering resentment from the council, and the unwavering loyalty of his warriors. He felt it all, but it no longer touched him with the sting of political concern. It was the detached awareness of a mountain observing the shifting weather on its slopes. He was still Rayleith. His hand, warm and strong, was still laced through mine. His eyes, when they met mine, still held the fierce, possessive love that was my anchor. But beneath the surface, the ancient spirit of the first wolf resided, a deep, quiet ocean of power. The flecks of gold in his irises were a constant reminder of the god that now looked out through the eyes of a king. As we reached the main level of the castle, Kaelin met us. The beta's eyes widened, his jaw going slack. He didn't just see his alpha, he felt him. Every wolf instinct in his body screamed at him to submit, to bare his throat to a power so absolute it defied comprehension. He fell to one knee, his head bowed, not in a gesture of simple fealty, but in profound, instinctual worship. "My king," he breathed, his voice thick with awe. "Rise, Kaelin," Rayleith's dual-toned voice commanded, gentle yet impossibly heavy. "Gather the council, gather the pack, have them assemble in the throne room, not the courtyard. They have bowed to stone long enough. Tonight they will bow to their king." There was no room for argument. Kaelin scrambled to his feet and rushed to do his bidding, his face a mask of terrified reverence. Rayleith led me not to our chambers to prepare, but directly toward the great hall. I was still clad only in his discarded tunic, which he had wrapped around me in the cavern. My hair was a wild tangle, my cheek was still marked with his blood, and the golden glow of my mark on my shoulder was a soft, steady beacon visible through the dark fabric. I was not the pristine, manicured image of a queen. I was the raw, primal image of his mate, marked by ritual and union. It was a more powerful statement than any crown or gown could ever be. The throne room was a cavernous space, its walls hung with ancient banners, its high ceiling held up by pillars, carved like weirwood trees. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat the throne of the Alpha King. It was not the ornate, jewel-encrusted seat I'd seen in the council chamber, but a far older one, carved from a single, massive piece of obsidian, the same stone as the monolith and the altar, its surface seeming to drink the torchlight. By the time we arrived, the pack was already assembled. They filled the vast hall, a sea of anxious, uncertain faces. The council, led by a pale and shaken Esmelda, stood near the dais, their expressions a mixture of defiance and a dawning dread. Lycoris was not with them. I could smell the scent of his defeat and sickness lingering in his empty space. The moment Rayleigh stepped into the hall with me at his side, a wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Every wolf, from the strongest warrior to the lowest servant, felt the monumental shift in his power. It was like the sun entering a room of candles. Their own alpha spirits instinctively recoiled, then bowed before his. A collective gasp was followed by an awed, fearful silence. Many fell to their knees without being commanded, an involuntary submission of the flesh to a power their souls could not deny. Rayleigh walked with a slow, deliberate grace, his presence filling the hall, pressing down on them, demanding their attention, their absolute fealty. He led me up the steps of the dais, a place no Omega had ever been permitted to stand. He did not take the throne. Instead, he stood before it, turning to face his people, his hand never leaving mine. "You have lived in fear of a prophecy," he began, his voice echoing in the rafters, each word resonating with the power of the mountain itself. "You allowed the whispers of dead seers to poison your loyalty. You allowed a bitter old wolf to pervert our most sacred laws and challenge your king." His gaze swept across the council, and they visibly flinched. Ismelda, to her credit, held his gaze, but the fear in her eyes was palpable. "The right of stone was invoked to sever a bond that was deemed a curse," he continued, his voice dropping, drawing them in. "And in his hatred, Lycoris did not sever it. He consecrated it. He did not destroy the prophecy. He initiated it." He gently turned me so my marked shoulder faced the pack, and pushed the tunic aside. In the flickering torchlight of the throne room, the mark glowed like a captive star, a warm, undeniable sun of golden light. It was no longer a symbol of death. It was a crest of divine right. "This is not the mark of a curse," Rayleigh declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "This is the mark of your queen. The unio sanguinis, the blood union, is complete. The prophecy is not about my end, it was about my ascension." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, letting the truth of what they were seeing and feeling sink into their bones. He was not asking them to believe, he was telling them what was. "The blood of Vornak has anointed the altar," he said, his voice taking on the cadence of a holy decree. "The king of the north has shed his mortality. The spirit of the first wolf walks among you once more. I am Rayleigh. I am Vornak. I am the eternal guardian of this pack, this mountain, this kingdom." And he pulled me back to his side, his arm encircling my waist, a gesture of ultimate possession and partnership, "is my queen, now and forever. Her bloodline is the key. Mine is the lock. Together we are your future." He looked directly at Ismelda. "Elder, do you still believe this union threatens the survival of our bloodline?" The severe-looking Alpha stared, her mind clearly struggling to reconcile the ancient laws she had dedicated her life to with the impossible reality standing before her. She saw the glowing mark. She felt the godlike power radiating from her king. She saw the undeniable strength of the bond that was supposed to have been shattered. Her lifetime of certainty crumbled in the face of divine fact. Slowly, her rigid posture broke. She sank to one knee, her head bowed low. Her voice, when she spoke, trembling with an emotion I could not name, fear or faith, or perhaps both. "The law is meant to interpret the will of the moon, my king. We see now the moon's will is clearer than any ancient script. Forgive our blindness." One by one, the other members of the council knelt. Their capitulation was a wave that washed over the entire pack. In seconds, every wolf in the great hall was on their knees, their heads bowed. The sound of 200 wolves simultaneously submitting was a soft rustle of cloth and leather, but the spiritual weight of it was immense. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated fealty, washing over the dais, acknowledging their new reality. They were no longer the subjects of a mere Alpha King. They were the children of a living god. Rayleigh looked out over his kneeling pack, his expression unreadable. I could feel no gloating triumph from him through the bond, only a profound sense of finality, A chapter had closed. A new one had begun. He had not broken his people. He had reforged them. He then looked down at me, and the god vanished, replaced for a moment by my mate. The flecks of gold in his eyes softened. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, his dual-toned voice a whisper meant only for me. "The prophecy is fulfilled," he murmured. "The king's line did end in shadow, just as they feared." He pulled back, a small, breathtaking smile on his face. "But a new line begins now, in light." He straightened and finally, for the first time, he sat upon the obsidian throne. It was not a king taking his seat, but a mountain reclaiming its peak. The stone seemed to welcome him, the shadows in the room deepening around the dais, making the golden light from my mark and the swirling gold in his eyes seem all the brighter. He pulled me gently onto his lap, seating me sideways so that I was cradled against his chest, my head resting on his shoulder. We were a single entity upon the throne, king and queen, alpha and omega, lock and key. He raised his hand and the pack looked up as one, their faces filled with awe. "Tonight we celebrate not the avoidance of a prophecy, but its glorious fulfillment," he announced, his voice the sound of shifting continents. "We celebrate the dawn of a new age. Go feast. Let the halls of Vornak ring with the strength of a pack reborn." A single unified howl of joyous, zealous loyalty erupted from the pack. It was a sound so powerful it shook the very stones of the castle, a triumphant answer to the mountain's call. They had a god for a king and a prophesied queen at his side. Their fear was gone, replaced by an unshakable, fanatical faith. As they began to file out of the throne room, their spirits alight, their voices already raised in celebration, Rayleigh held me tighter, his chin resting on my head. The great hall slowly emptied, leaving us alone in the vast, echoing space, seated upon the throne of ages. "They will follow you to the end of the world," I whispered, overwhelmed by the power of their devotion. "They will follow us," he corrected, his voice a soft rumble against my ear. He placed a tender kiss on my temple. "The grimoire spoke of one final thing, Kalira, the true purpose of the ascension." I looked up at him, my heart full. "What is it?" "The power of the first wolf is not meant to be contained in one vessel forever. It is meant to strengthen the bloodline, to create a new generation of alphas with the spirit of the mountain in their veins." His golden-flecked eyes met mine, and the look in them was filled with a love so profound it was eternal. "It is meant to ensure that our children, and their children after them, will never have to fear the shadows again." The prophecy had not been about the end of his line. It had been about the beginning of ours. The first snows of winter had just begun to fall, dusting the peaks of the northern mountains in a coat of pristine white. From the balcony of our chambers, I watched the flakes drift down into the courtyard, where a new generation of pups tumbled and played, their joyous yips echoing in the crisp, cold air. 3 winters had passed since the night of the Ascension. 3 years of unprecedented peace and prosperity for the Vornak pack and the allied clans. The whispers of the curse had faded into legend, replaced by the tale of the Omega Queen whose mark had brought forth their eternal king. A pair of strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and Rayleigh's familiar scent of pine and cold mountain air enveloped me. He rested his chin on my shoulder, his presence a comforting, unshakable weight against my back. The gold in his eyes was a permanent feature now, a warm, steady fire that held the wisdom of ages. But when he looked at me, it was always with the same fierce love he'd had on the night he chose me. "They are getting strong," he rumbled, his gaze on the playing children below. "They have a good teacher," I murmured, leaning back against his solid chest. Among the pups, a young boy with dark hair and startlingly silver eyes, flecked with the barest hint of gold, stood a head taller than the others. He was gentle with the smaller children, but held an air of innate authority that made the other pups naturally defer to him. Our son, Lyran, born under the first full moon of the new age, he was the living proof of the prophecy's true meaning, the beginning of a new line. "He has his mother's heart," Rayleigh said softly. And his father's everything else, I countered with a smile. The elders say they have never seen a pup so strong. The elders say many things now, he said, a hint of amusement in his dual-tone voice. Ismelda, now the High Elder of the Council, had become my most devout supporter, a fierce defender of the queen she had once sought to banish. Lycoris had passed peacefully in his sleep that first winter, his spirit finally at rest. The pack was united, strong, and looked to the future not with fear, but with unshakable faith. My mark, once a source of shame, was a faint silvery tracery on my shoulder again, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Its golden light only ever returned in moments of extreme emotion, or when Raelith and I were joined as one, a private sun for our most intimate moments. It was no longer a curse or even a crown, but simply a part of me, a beautiful scar that told the story of how I found my home. Raelith turned me in his arms, his gaze tender. "Do you ever miss the silence?" he asked, his thumb gently stroking my cheek. "The anonymity of your old life?" I thought of the lonely, frightened girl I had been, sleeping in barns, shunned by everyone, my only companion the constant, gnawing fear of my own skin. I looked at the man who had seen a queen where everyone else saw a curse. I listened to the happy sounds of our son playing below. I felt the deep, steady thrum of our bond, a song of absolute belonging that was the bedrock of my world. "I was never anonymous," I answered, my hand coming up to rest over his heart. "I was just unheard. You were the first one to listen." He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, deep kiss filled with the quiet comfort of years of shared dawns and whispered secrets. It was a kiss that tasted of home. The question that had once haunted my every waking moment, will our bond defy fate or fulfill the prophecy, had been answered. It had done both. As he held me there, with the snow falling around us, and our son's laughter rising from below, I knew with a certainty that was as deep and unshakable as the mountain beneath our feet that I had not been born marked for death. I had been born marked for him. And our story, once a prophecy of an ending, had become a legend of a beginning that would never fade.